Hello, class, and welcome back to the second part of our lecture on the psychology of emotions in the course Introduction to Psychology. So, within this section, we will be exploring a little bit of the James Lange theory. Now, there are lots of different perspectives on different types of theories about psychology, but historically the James Lange theory has been around for a very long time, and so it's probably one of the best ones to start off with. Now, the James Lange theory is a psychological theory that explains how emotions are experienced in the human body. And it's named after the two researchers who developed it. The American psychologist William James, who, if you recall from the very first lecture, was one of the kind of founding fathers of psychology in the North America, and as well as the Danish physiologist Carl Lange. Now, the theory was first introduced in the late 19th century, and this was during a time when there was growing interest in really understanding the whole nature of emotions. And prior to this, many believed that emotions were purely mental experiences, and that they were not related to the physical body. However, James and Lange argued that emotions were actually a result of bodily changes that occurred in response to a stimulus. Now, the theory proposed that emotions are experienced as a result of the physiological changes that occur in response to a stimulus. So it is essentially the brain-body interaction, as well as interacting with our own appraisal of a situation. Now, according to James and Lange, when an individual encounters a stimulus, their body reacts with a series of physical responses, such as, but of course not limited to, things like increased heart rate, sweating, changes in facial expression. And these physical responses are then interpreted by the brain as an emotion, such as fear, anger, or happiness. And that's part of our subjective experience, is we have a subjective experience of an automatic, somewhat automatic, unconscious process that is going on as part of the interaction between our brain and our body. Now, one of the key differences between James and Lange's theory and other theories of emotions that were popular at the time is the order in which the physical and emotional responses occur. According to James and Lange, the physiological response occurs first. That is, our bodies instantly get our brains instantly get our body ready. And it's only after this response that the individual experiences the subjective experience of emotion. So there's an automatic process that happens first, and then the person needs to react to it. Hence, the way that a lot of people frame their emotions as being, that person makes me feel this way. Other theories, such as the Cannon-Bard theory, propose that the emotional response and the physiological response occurred simultaneously. Now, the James Lange theory has been applied in a wide range of emotional experiences, including things like fear and anxiety, as well as a more complex emotion like love. For example, if an individual encounters a snake, their body may react with a series of physical responses, such as an increased heart rate, sweating, and changes in breathing. It is only after these physical responses occur that the individual experiences the emotion of fear. Now, while the James Lange theory was influential in the development of our understanding of emotions, it has been criticized for its simplicity and its inability to explain all types of emotional experiences. For example, The theory's been criticized for not being able to explain how individuals can experience emotions such as joy or sadness without a clear physiological response. But for what it is, I hope that we can recognize that the James Lange theory has played an influential role in our understanding of emotions, recognizing that it is not the end-all and be-all, and that emotions are indeed complex. That there is a series of automatic, unconscious, and fast-moving responses that our body takes in response to the environment. But also, we have cognitive control over a great deal of what goes on. And so, in understanding all of this, we can better treat people that are suffering from, say, for example, affective or what we call emotional disorders, things like anxiety or depression. So, hope that kind of makes sense for you, the James Lange theory of emotions. So, let's go on and explore a little bit of stress. We all experience stress at one time or another within our lives. And psychologically, stress can be defined as a state of mental or emotional strain or tension resulting from a negative or adverse or very demanding circumstances where our bodies apprise ourselves that we will be stressed in a situation, and so our bodies automatically prepare to meet the demands of that stress. And stress itself is a complex process that involves our perceptions of the world, the ways that we are genetically wired, because not everybody's wired the same way genetically to deal with stress, and also our interpretation of the stressor, that is, our interpretation of the event or situation that is perceived as either threatening or challenging. For example, the first time you ride a bicycle, it is a significant stressor. Later on, you ride a bicycle because it's enjoyable and not a stressor and it's relaxing. But it's part of it isn't the activity itself, it is our interpretation of the activity. It's also our physiological and psychological responses to the stressor, the situation, as well as the individual's effort to cope with or adapt to the stressor. So there's a lot that goes on with stress, obviously. And stresses can be both positive and negative on an individual's well-being, depending upon the intensity and the duration of the stress and the individual's ability to cope. For example, going for a brisk walk can be stressful, but it's really good for you. Short-term stress can be beneficial. It can help people to wake up, to focus their attention, to increase their motivation, to enhance their performance. However, prolonged stress or chronic stress can lead to a range of physical and psychological health problems, including anxiety, depression, cardiovascular disease, and immune dysfunction. Now, today we will discuss the HPA axis, which is an important physiological system in the human body that plays a key role in our response to stress. Now, the HPA stands for hypothalamic, pituitary, adrenal, and the axis refers to the complex interplay between the hypothalamus, the pituitary, and the adrenal gland. So this is more of a hormonal response rather than a neurochemical or electrophysical response. But it's also very important for understanding our emotions and how emotions impact on our lives. So the hypothalamus is a small structure in the brain, and it is responsible for regulating a wide range of bodily functions, including things like appetite or thirst or body temperature, as well as sleep. If you've ever been stressed, sometimes it's hard to sleep, or maybe you don't feel like eating. Or if you're really stressed, maybe you eat to comfort yourself. All of that has to do with the hypothalamus. It also plays a crucial role in the stress response by releasing a hormone called corticotropin releasing hormone, CRH, in response to the stress. Now, when CRH is released, it signals the pituitary gland to release another hormone called adrenocorticotropic hormone, ACTH. Now, ACTH then travels to the adrenal gland, which is located on the top of the kidneys, and stimulates the release of cortisol, a stress hormone. And cortisol helps the body to mobilize energy and cope with stress by increasing blood sugar levels, suppressing the immune system, and altering metabolism. Now, you might not think that you have a stressful life, but every time you wake up in the morning, about an hour after you wake up, your body has spiked its level of cortisol for the day. If you ever feel that lull at 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, that's because your cortisol levels have leveled off to a rather steady low. Now, the HPA axis is regulated by a negative feedback loop, which means that once cortisol levels rise in response to stress, they eventually signal the hypothalamus and pituitary gland to reduce the CRH and ACTH production, leading to a decrease in cortisol levels. So this feedback loop is important for preventing excessive cortisol release, which can lead to negative health outcomes such as a decreased immune system function and cognitive impairment. So the body tries to only use cortisol as a way of getting yourself moving for short-term gains in energy and focus. It isn't something that's meant to be run on all day long. Now, interestingly, the HPA axis can also be influenced by psychological factors, such as our perception of stress or by a person's personality traits. Individuals who perceive stressors as more threatening and have a tendency to ruminate on negative events may have an exaggerated HPA response, leading to higher cortisol levels and an increased risk of health-related or stress-related health problems. Now, overall, the HPA axis is obviously a very complex feedback loop, but it's an important physiological system that helps to motivate and move our bodies to respond to stress. So there's a very adaptive function to it. There's that feedback loop between the hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenal glands that help us regulate our energy levels, but it's also influenced by various psychological factors. Now, I want to hone in now specifically on cortisol for a little bit, because if cortisol levels remain high and there's continual stressors throughout a day, that can have significant harm to an individual's emotional wellness. Because cortisol is a hormone that is released by that adrenal gland in response to stress, and is part of the body's stress response system and plays an important role in regulating the body's metabolism as well as the immune system and stress response. It helps to tell for example, blood vessels to tighten. It tells the immune system to stop working for a little bit of time because more energy needs to be focused upon whatever the immediate threat is. However, prolonged exposure to cortisol can have negative effects on the body because cortisol is kind of toxic to your nervous system. Chronic high levels of cortisol can lead to a condition known as Cushing's syndrome, which is characterized by a variety of symptoms, including weight gain, muscle weakness, fatigue, and high blood pressure. In addition to these physical symptoms, high cortisol levels can also have toxic effects on the nervous system. Cortisol can affect the function and structure of brain cells. It can disrupt what we call cytoarchitecture, which is the ways that brain cells are organized, leading to a variety of cognitive and emotional problems. For example, high cortisol levels have been linked to decreased memory and cognitive function, as well as an increase in anxiety and depression. And one of the ways that cortisol can have these effects is by damaging the hippocampus, which is a part of the brain that is critical for our short-term working memory. It processes memory, solidifies memory, turns everyday activities into memories. And studies have shown that chronic high cortisol levels can lead to the shrinkage of the hippocampus, which can in turn lead to problems with the memory and cognitive functions. So in addition to its effects on the hippocampus, cortisol can also affect the prefrontal cortex. Remember, that's the part of the brain that helps us be mature. It helps us make good decisions. It helps us to control our impulses. High cortisol levels have been linked to decreased activity in the prefrontal cortex, which can lead to problems with decision making, can lead to you being impulsive and losing your self-control. So overall, while cortisol is an important part of the body's stress response system, chronic high stress, resulting in chronic high levels of cortisol, can be toxic to your nervous system. And so it's important to manage stress levels and to seek treatment if your cortisol levels are too high in order to prevent any long-term damage to your brain and indeed to your other organs, because it disrupts a lot of what is going on within your body. So that's a little bit about stress. So overall, I hope you've learned something about emotions. So in essence, emotions and stress are important aspects of our lives. And yes, they influence how we behave and how we feel. So we have explored the biology of emotions. We've learned about the James Lange theory, which suggests that our physical responses lead to emotional experience. And additionally, we have discussed the HPA axis and the role of cortisol in stress reactions, as well as the negative effects of chronic high cortisol on the nervous system. So while stress is a normal part of life, it's important to find ways to manage it, to prevent negative health outcomes. So there are some concrete examples I want to leave you with to improve your emotional health. The first number one thing is never go to bed angry. When you go to bed angry, you are solidifying negative perspectives. And negative perspectives get embedded into your limbic system. It sets up your entire emotional structure to see the world as a threat. And so that can significantly disrupt your emotional well-being and eventually, depending upon your genetic structure, can lead to issues like panic disorder, anxiety, depression. So be mindful of that. Also, exercise regularly. Exercise is a natural stress reliever that helps to reduce cortisol levels in your body. Now, this doesn't mean you need to run a marathon. That's going to add some stress, but it means have some good regular physical activity so that your body can engage the world and use whatever little bit of cortisol is there to enjoy the world. Practice relaxation techniques, meditation, deep breathing, progressive muscle relaxation, self-hypnosis. All of these are effective relaxation techniques that you can help to reduce and relieve your stress. Another thing is to get enough sleep. We've talked about this in the consciousness lecture, but lack of sleep can increase your level of stress. It can increase your negative perceptions of the world. So it's important to get that 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night. So it's important to have a good sleep routine. Have an hour of dim light or darkness prior to going to bed so that your body can adjust. Connect with others. Having a positive social support network always helps buffer stress. And practice time management. It's important to set some limits upon your life. When you are trying to be everything to everyone all the time, it can take a toll on you. Remember, people were actually meant to be small beings, to live small lives. So when we try to cause our success to outstrip our ability physically to engage in constant success, it can be damaging. So practice effective time management to help you organize your life, reduce feelings of stress, and reduce your sense of a need to always be productive. And remember, managing stress is an ongoing process, and it's important to find what works best for you. So by implementing these strategies, hopefully you will reduce your stress, you will overall be a healthier person, and you will be able to model that for those that you care for. So, thanks again for engaging in this lecture where we covered the biology of emotions, the James Lange theory of emotions, and the nature of stress. I hope this information was informative and helpful, and I hope you enjoyed this lecture. You take care. Goodbye.